Hi everyone.
Hi,
What's
Internet.
up? Who are we talking to? Who are we talking to? I'm here with Sabah, co-founder of the Biota project, and we're going to be doing our makeup together while I interview Sabah about what the Biota project is up to this month, because Sabah came up with this theme, data literacy, and she wrote a whole article about it, which will be linked down below in case you haven't read that.
And I have a couple questions for Daniela about how to do my makeup, since I do not know. But I'm gonna find out.
It's gonna be a learning experience all around, and we're just gonna have fun with it.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniela, for hosting and setting stuff up. Right?
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's get into
Yeah,
it.
so we're just doing our own individual.
Yeah, we're gonna
Okay.
be doing our own individual makeup right now. We're just gonna be talking about what we're doing with our makeup and why we're doing it, as well as just talking about what's going on with the Biota project and data literacy this month. So the first thing I'm gonna do in my makeup routine, something that I always try to remember to do, is sunscreen. I always try to remember to put some sunscreen on. I have here just this mango mild sunblock sunscreen from Tony Moly, which is one of those Korean beauty brands.
I already have some
You
lotion
want
on
some?
already.
Oh,
I have
okay.
some already, but this is, I always just use, so I was telling Daniela, my makeup is like really old and very sparse. So this is like over 5 years old, I think. It's a BB cream, Garnier BB cream, maybe a couple of years old, I guess. But I usually just wear lotion, I guess, and sometimes I'll use a little crimper for my eyelashes. So I'm about to get a whole makeover today. What got you interested in doing makeup?
Wow, that's always a really heavy question, actually. It's never a light answer. And I've talked a little bit about this on my own YouTube channel, actually. I have my own YouTube channel that I started, I think, 3 years ago. And how I got into makeup when I was starting high school. I had a really abusive father who hated everything that had to do with femininity, and so I kind of got into it as a sort of, I guess, acting out, counter response. I just wanted to explore as like a rebel to go against my father, who was very patriarchal and hated when his like female children, his daughters, would express their femininity in any way.
Well, that's badass. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome.
Exactly. And I'm just going to put on some of my foundation. I have this Too Faced Born This Way, and I'm applying it with my beauty blender, mostly around my chin area, because that's where I have the most discoloration and stuff. I don't really struggle with discoloration like on my forehead or like on the tops of my cheeks. It's mostly around my chin where I want a little bit more coverage.
I'm putting on this, again, this is older, I think, than the BB cream. It's the True Match Natural.
You're
I don't even know if
hilarious.
people use this anymore, but I'm still using it. I just like it because you can see that my face is a bit shiny, so I like using it because it just makes it a little less shiny that way, and it kind of dries up the oiliness from the BB cream. Oh, sorry, I'm getting this.
See, you know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about.
I
You
don't
do
know.
You do know. You do
I
know.
need more help.
So,
Oop, I'm dropping stuff.
sorry. No, you're good. You're good.
Messing up the video.
This will make it in the cut.
Bloopers.
Outtake.
Bloopers, real.
So Sabah, data literacy, huh?
Yeah.
What inspired that choice of theme?
Well, so in the article, as people will read, you will probably sense some angst in the first section. I would say
It's true.
I would say it's coming from a place of I don't know, just, you know, being in the sciences. Sciences are, you know, they're very internationally collaborative, which is great, but there's still a lot of disproportionately distributed power, and I just felt like, wow, I'm South Asian, my mom's Indian, my father's Pakistani. There's like 2 billion South Asians in the world. And, you know, there's just so many in like Western media, there's just so many negative stereotypes. Like they're just like dorky, and they like work at the 7-Eleven or the gas station, like, you know, and so I wanted to kind of start on this stereotype of South Asians, and like growing up, you know, kind of what people would stereotype me as or my family as, the stereotype of South Asians, you know, being the people that answer your phone calls, and going deeper into that and talking about actually there's a lot more to that, and, you know, jokes on everybody outsourcing to South Asians in other countries because as a result of that, and kind of, you know, initially trying to take people for granted from other countries that are less wealthy or less affluent, they're starting to now become really well established in technology and the tech industry, and now it's like a threat. Right now there are countries that are like, oh, China, oh, India, like, you know, that we got to be concerned about that, and it's like, well, you guys did this. In South Asian culture, we don't talk about, it's starting to become more common now, I'd say, in my generation, but we don't really talk about our colonial history with the British. And in a lot of ways, I think in some ways we accept it, we embrace it, and there's like some negative terms in South Asian culture that are associated with, like, you know, having your hair like super curly or being super dark skinned, and, you know, on the opposite side, you know, it's very appealing to be very fair skinned. There's even a makeup called Fair and Lovely that will help you look more fair.
Oh my God.
So there's a lot of colonialism very deep in our culture or a lot of like institutionalized prejudice deep in our culture as a result of our colonial history. That was just, you know, 3 generations ago. My grandmothers were both alive during the time of British colonization. And so going back to your original question of data literacy, you're like, oh, you know, like you're saying how, you know, makeup was kind of a deep story for you, and I'm really glad you shared that. And I feel similarly with the data literacy. And I said some pretty bold things, I'd say, that maybe, you know, as a scientist, you know, there's always this battle of, you know, being code switching and, you know, being formal in our language and being, you know, talking in a scientific way.
Wow. Yeah, that was a whole answer.
That was an answer. That was an answer.
Yeah, it's interesting, right, that when you first started talking about data literacy and having the Biota project's theme in November be data literacy, I remember when those words first came out, data literacy, it took me a while to understand what they meant and where you were coming from with that, because it's interesting because that same term is also a form of data literacy. If you don't know what data literacy means, you don't really, you can't, but that is also some type of data. That's some information. You need to know some information in order to understand the concept of data literacy. Point. For that reason, it's just like a striking idea. It's a striking concept because it's becoming more and more important in this age of, you know, rising technology and specialization in technology and our reliance on technology, and how as this country we're sending away that knowledge. Like, we're not kind of learning it ourselves, but we're outsourcing it, like you said. We're putting it out, we're giving it to someone else for our own like selfish capitalistic reasons, but that is causing this ultimate consequence of people here not being as literate when it comes to data, but people over there with a silver lining involved, that they become more literate when it comes to whatever is being outsourced.
Yeah, it's so complex in that, and that also going back into data literacy, you know, when you think of tech, you think of Google, you think of Facebook, you think of, you know, social media. There's a lot of power it's kind of like another form of privilege where the people who are informed on how to program or, you know, how to use data, because we're using data all the time, you know, on YouTube, there's little hashtags, that's data. There's data in our daily life, you know, what time we brush our teeth every day to what time we go to bed, and that's all a form of data. And now because of smartphones, that's being collected so much and so fast, and there is a lot of power in these organizations like Google and Facebook that have so much information of our data, our personal information, and that becomes a concern in terms of privacy and rights. And so for me, data literacy is also, this topic of data literacy is, you know, this topic from a personal interest and personal background, but also from a perspective of wanting to give everybody the same kind of agency of their own data by informing them of like, what is data literacy, how can you develop it. I'm really, really interested both, you know, here in the States, growing up in America, and then also, you know, back in places that are not as affluent. Of course, that's true for different parts of the US as well. Some neighborhoods are wealthier than others, you know, trying to just contribute more towards that equity of people being informed on how their data is being used, and being able to then, once they have that information, being like, no, this is how I want my data to be used, and not someone else making that decision for me. And a good example of this is there's so much food grown in California, in Central Valley, California, but the majority of that really high quality food gets shipped to the Bay Area or San Diego or somewhere else, and people don't get to, the people that grow that food don't even get to enjoy it. But if they had that literacy then, and that access, then they could have that agency to say, you know, we're actually the ones making this food and putting in the labor and all of this. And
that's interesting. And actually bringing it back to makeup, since we're doing makeup here, another thing about outsourcing, right, is manufacturing. And this is always something that through my makeup journey I've become more conscious of, is understanding where my products are made and who makes them and under what conditions are they made. When I first started my YouTube channel, I didn't really have any idea about any of that, what goes into this particular product arriving at my doorstep. Becoming more knowledgeable about the processes behind makeup production and consumption, I started to realize that a lot of makeup is created overseas, or in ways that perhaps are not as paid as well as in the US, and there are definitely some issues there that are like around human, like ethical human, like production. As a result of that, I've become more conscious of where I buy my makeup and from what brands I buy my makeup, and I'm trying to only purchase products made here in the USA, and just so that I know exactly where my makeup is coming from and under what conditions it's being made. Outsourcing is it's definitely
very controversial.
Yeah, it's very controversial. And it's something that happens not only in data literacy, but in manufacturing and agriculture and across the board in all industries it happens. It's hard to imagine a world in which it's not,
where people don't take
common.
Advantage. And I think there was an article I saw, maybe it was with Vox, on mica. I don't know if you know about, like, it's the stuff that makes, I guess, makeup shiny. And how it's very tied to a lot of child labor in South Asia as well, and how there's a pushback against, because it's not just in mica, it's in I think car paints and a whole bunch of other products.
Yeah, it's a pretty common mineral used like in industry. Wow, that's some deep stuff with our
getting into it. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Wow. Okay, so we're almost done here. I just put on my lip. This is the Revlon Color Burst. This is actually also a relatively old product. It's been since discontinued, but I still hold on to it because makeup does have an expiration date, but it's your own personal preference of when to heed that expiration date. So as we're wrapping up here, I just want to thank you again, Sabah, for coming over to my house. We're at my house right now, and hanging out and doing this interview. Biota is a multimedia science communication platform, so we're exploring all kinds of media to engage in science communication. I just have one last question for you, Sabah, before you're gonna head off to sunny San Diego afternoon, and that is, what is one thing that you have learned throughout your process in the Biota project? What is one thing you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing I've learned is, I came in and I started this with a good friend of mine, Jay Abubo, through this interest to create space where we didn't see it already or yet existing. And now it's really great that, enough time has passed where more organizations and initiatives have come up that are creating more of this space for people. And I think for me, when you're kind of pushing forward on something, you're, one of the first people, and so there's not really any groundwork, or there's no instructions, no manual, and you're kind of just throwing stuff out there and seeing what works, what doesn't. And for me, what I've really learned is, that I can just always be learning more. I mean, through you, through other people joining the group. I think one thing we really don't give enough people credit for when we're in a team or when we're in any sort of organization is people who have some form of leadership could really do a better job in any situation, could really do a better job of listening to what everyone has to say and their ideas. We definitely weight, at least in the US, we definitely weight ideas based off of somebody's position or their title, and it's kind of like a hierarchy or an aristocracy. Like, someone might believe what I say more about something with science because I have a PhD versus someone who doesn't have a PhD, and basically learning, that I can always be learning and learning through all of you.
Right. That's I think one thing that I've learned throughout this whole process is like the necessity for multimedia communication, because I've always been a learner that goes against the grain. I've never learned in traditional ways or mainstream ways. I've always been that weird kid in the classroom that learns in very different ways. And through the Biota project, seeing what all you have done so far in terms of expanding what learning means and what communication can look like, especially to diverse audiences, has been very inspiring, and why I believe so much in this mission.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
This was a nice moment. Yeah, thanks, Danielle. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone in the internet screen.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Saturday afternoon. I'm here in San Diego with Sabah, the co-founder of the Biota project, and I'll have all the links down below in case you're interested in checking out this grassroots multimedia science communication platform.
Comment with your thoughts. What do you think? What are ideas that you have? Other stuff you'd like to see?
Yeah, let us know if you enjoyed this video and what you would like to see from the Biota project.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. See ya.